How are we doing, guys? All Leeds TV. We are joined by more Championship royalty yet again. Ryan Dilks from the Second Tier podcast. How are you doing, mate?
I'm absolutely superb, lads. How are you guys?
Very well.
We're all still absolutely Championship royalty.
Sorry.
Yet again. Being Premier League. But to start off with, Ryan, mate, tell us a bit about the Second Tier podcast.
So the Second Tier started just over a year ago now, and we just wanted to focus on Championship football because, from as far as I'm aware, there aren't any other Championship podcasts, and I think it's a market there that we wanted to really dedicate ourselves to, so that people had a podcast where they can go and listen to and hear two people talk about the Championship itself. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I listen to other podcasts, it's all about the Premier League, and then they'll probably mention the Championship for about 5 minutes, and that's about it. And then they'll move on to something else. So we wanted to give people a podcast where they could, hear what else is going on in the Championship and also talk about their team as well. And obviously now it's quite annoying because we're going to be losing Leeds, who have been a key part of the Championship for over 10 years now. But I imagine you guys will still want to hear what is going on in the league below and see who's standing out. So if you guys do carry on listening to us next season, we'll really appreciate it.
Just on that as well, big shout out to the Second Tier. I'm a huge fan. I listen to it every week. I think our last knows Ryan and Justin's voice. She gets sick of it by the end because it's all Leeds United podcast, then Second Tier. But honestly, a lot of my material as well, whenever I've been doing videos, a lot of the stats and a lot of the stuff on opposition players and stuff comes from the Second Tier, because the knowledge is second to none. So if Championship is your bag, then like I said, make sure you check them out because they're a great listen.
Yeah, and I've got to say as well, what I love about the Second Tier podcast is your promotion of underrated players. Underrated players is what I really like about it. Players that Leeds fans probably don't know a lot about, but then when you promote them, and then when we watch Leeds play, I think Eze was the big one for me. I wasn't really too aware of Eze before the start of last season, and then we played QPR, beat them, and I was like, oh yeah, he is pretty good. He is as good as what the Second Tier podcast says, you know what I mean? But to start off with, mate, obviously something we didn't get to yesterday was the Championship team of the season. We've all picked our own Championship teams of the season. We're going to go to the neutral first of all. We're going to go to the neutral with his least biased team of the season. So we're just going to flash it up on screen. And right then, so talk us through it, Ryan, mate.
So I've gone for a pretty Brexit 4-4-2, and then with two foreign lads doing all the fancy tricks on the wings, and then two English lads in midfield. But I thought, for me, the front two pretty much speak for themselves, don't they? Mitrovic and Watkins, who have been superb this season. They are quite obvious when it comes to the strike force. And then Benrahma, Pereira also speak for themselves, really. They're both, in fact, pretty much this whole strike force in the midfield pretty much do all the talking for themselves, don't they? Because Benrahma and Pereira have been superb for their respective clubs. And then in the middle, Easy's probably been the most improved player this season by far. And I imagine he'll be sniffed out by quite a few clubs in the Premier League this season. And Calvin Phillips, you lads know all about anyway. The defence and goalkeeper was the bit where I was struggling a bit. I'll start off with Dallas, because obviously he's played at left back quite a bit this season, but he's also been, centre mid, on the wing. He's been all over the place, hasn't he? And the left back position, there aren't too many standout candidates in the Championship. Rico Henry was another one I thought of, but I thought I'd go with Dallas in the end because he has been so good for Leeds this season, and I didn't have any other left back to choose from. Ben White, as you lads know, speaks for himself, really. His centre-back partner, Ethan Pinnock, is someone I am a massive fan of, and it wouldn't surprise me if quite a few Premier League clubs were looking at him next season as well, because Brentford have one of the best defensive records behind Leeds in the Championship, and he's really been the constant there. He's been superb when it comes to playing with Pontus Jansson, but Jansson's had his injury problems this season, and Pinnock has been the constant. He has been a superb sign, and they signed him from Barnsley, when they were in League One last season, and he's made the step up to being one of the best centre backs in the Championship. And then right back between Matty Cash at Forest and Luke Ayling, it was a bit of a coin toss, really. I would have gone with Cash for the whole season, but his last few games, as we all know, Forest have had a bit of a capitulation, and he's not been great himself. But I've decided to stick with him in the end. I wouldn't have been too surprised if I went with Ayling in the end. And then goalkeeper, you could have picked 5 or 6 players, really. But Białkowski is the one who stood out for me, mainly because he's made some unbelievable saves for Millwall this season and has ended up being one of the signings of the season, really. Millwall have got a brilliant defensive record, and he's been one of the key parts of that, really. So it's a team that I try to kind of get some names in as well, where it's not just teams who have been fighting for promotion as well. It's players who have been so important to their respective sides, no matter where they are in the Championship. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that side, I'd say.
So I'm going to go to Joe's team. I think we've all picked similar teams. I think there's similar names. There's 5 or 6 names who are going into every single person's team. But I'm going to go to Joe's team. So, Joe, talk us through your team. You've got them similar, but a couple of differences.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I did one for the EFL the Sky podcast, and a thing that Billy from the Brentford podcast set up. And it was very much the same. The only difference this time, I did have John Swift in there instead of Eze, just because I'm a massive fan of John Swift and the impact that he has on a very poor Reading side. But then again, you could say the same for Eze at QPR. But I decided to go with Eze. Look, Matty Cash, like Ryan had said, has had a fantastic season. But for me, I couldn't miss out Ayling, and the fact that he does spend time at centre-back, Leeds bias, I thought I'd squeeze him in there. Stewie D, again, I think I was the only one on the Sky thing that put him in there, but he was my player of the season, and my pick for player of the season at the Leeds Awards. I think he got player's player, and Pablo actually won player of the season, didn't he, 3 years on the trot. But yeah, I needed to get Dallas in there. I can't say player of the season for Leeds United and then not stick him in me end of the year team. And I'm a massive fan of Stewie D, and Ryan's right. He's played all over. He could probably play up front if he was asked to. I mean, I know when he's played in the KP role at times, a lot of people have been like, let's not see that again. But you always know you're going to get 100% out of him. And I chose Bryce Samba in goal as well. I thought he's had a great season. He was my keeper when I did it earlier on before lockdown. I thought he really showed them up, because if you remember when Forest started the season, they had I think it was the kid Muric on loan from City, and they were shipping goals and they were making howlers. Then Samba came in and he really showed them up. And he made that fantastic double save against Cooper, I think, in that game when we were 1 down, and Forest won the league, if you remember. I wonder how that turned out. But yeah, that's my team of the season. And like you said, the strikers, speak for themselves. Hopefully, Brentford don't go up, and we can nick Watkins. That would be ideal. I mean, even Pinnock, like Ryan spoke about Pinnock, he's a fantastic player. I remember when he made the move to Brentford. We were speaking with the Barnsley fan, and he said just how great he was in League One, and he has made that step up. So it'd be interesting to see what happens if Brentford don't go up, if indeed that side gets picked apart. But that was my team of the season. Yeah, I've heard on the grapevine as well, by the way, that Janssen might not be fit for tonight. I don't know if there's any truth in that, but we'll wait and see, I guess. There you go.
So, Jack, you and Tash have also picked a team. I'm just going to flash yours up on screen too.
Yeah, I'll go from mine there. Obviously, I've gone with Samba, same as Joe. I think he's been absolutely fantastic for Forest this year. A few games that I've watched them on telly, and I think it is that double save from Cooper. It just blew my mind how he did that. And I know Forest fans have raved about him. They've gone on, he's the best keeper in Championship and everything. But to be fair, I think he has been best keeper this year. My back four, I know I've got 2 right backs in Matty Cash and Luke Ayling, but I couldn't leave either of them out because I think they've both been absolutely fantastic. even though Dallas is my player of the year for Leeds this year, I couldn't put him in there. So yeah, obviously Ben White speaks for himself, and Ethan Pinnock. I mean, Jansen's the big name there at Brentford, but that kid, £3 million from Barnsley, and he's just been absolutely fantastic for them. I think he's been the main rock for Brentford at the back, and I mean they've only conceded 38 goals all year. I think they've actually conceded less than anyone in the Championship. Obviously, I've gone for Mbeumo because the BMW for Brentford this year have just been absolutely just lightning. That's what's caused or made them be where they are. I mean, Mbeumo is 15 goals, 8 assists. I mean, his goal participation involved in 28% of their goals all year. So, I mean, it just for a winger, that's frightening statistics. I mean, Pereira himself, again, 8 goals, 20 assists in midfield, you know, fantastic. Eze, 14 goals, 8 assists in a team that have not really been doing anything, you know. But, I mean, I think we mentioned it yesterday with Benjamin, and for Calvin Phillips said over 2 games he's been the hardest player for him to compete against. It's just been absolute murder trying to keep up with him. He got ball, he'd slip ball past him. So that just shows, you know, how good that kid is. And I think he's on everyone's radar at the minute, as we all say. And then obviously the front two, I think, speaks for itself. Watkins, 25 goals, Mitrovic, Golden Boot. You can't see past either of them. And I hope Watkins comes to Leeds next year, please. That's the one I want.
I tell you what, Jack, we've got a few comments in here asking why no Phillips. I want to know myself, where's Calvin in that side?
Well, I mean, me and Oscar actually just before we come on, we said I think we might get a bit of grief here. Now it's nothing to do with.
Oh, Oscar done it as well.
It's nothing to do with obviously Calvin. We love Calvin, and I know how good Calvin is. But for Eze, like I said, the stats: 14 goals, 8 assists in a team that have just been nigh mediocre or just mid-table, doing nothing. He's carried that team on his own, and obviously Pereira he's been different class. So I just couldn't find a place for him in my midfield. Sorry, Leeds fans, I love Calvin, we know we do, but just for this one, it's my Championship team at year.
Yeah, guys, I mean, I've pretty much gone the same. I don't need to talk about 9 of the 11 because, you know, obviously we've already discussed how good these players are. I think we've all gone with, you know, the same front two, the same 2 out wide, you know, Pereira and Benrahma. Well, I'm just going to talk about 2 players in the middle who I've gone for. I'm waiting for the comments going to come in. They're going to absolutely hammer me for this, but I've got to put in Romain Sawyers. I mean, whenever I've watched West Brom this season, I'm not sure. I'd be interested in what Ryan's thoughts are on this. Whenever I've watched West Brom this season, I've looked at Sawyers and thought, this is some player. You know, he just is. He's not a goal scorer or a creator as such, but he just does all the dirty work in midfield, and his passing as well. I think it's 90% pass completion, and he's not playing little simple 5-10 yarders. He's spraying the ball out to Pereira, he's spraying the ball out to Dean Garner. I think he's a crucial part of that West Brom team, but probably the least kind of praise from that West Brom team. So I had to include Sawyers. I did think Calvin or Pablo in the middle, but I thought, you know what, I'd go for the sexier option and go for I thought I'd go a bit more exciting to go alongside Sawyers. I just think Pablo, before lockdown, I'd have gone Phillips all day long, or Click even, alongside Sawyers there. But like Joe, I've just kind of gone with Pablo. I think obviously Joe went for Eze instead of Swift. I just think Pablo, the way he stepped up those last few games, being that driving force, and he's only started 27 out of the 46 games, and normally I wouldn't even consider him for a player of the season or player team of the year, you know, on that basis. But I think the influence he's had on the team, but that's the only kind of difference I'd go with, guys. But I think we're pretty much in agreement on the vast majority of positions. But Ryan, obviously, we know what's coming up. We've mentioned it already, but the playoffs are coming up. Plenty of comments coming on into the stream. We've all discussed between us 3 and Benjamin. We all went with different playoff winners. All 4 of us went for different playoff winners. I've seen a few mentions of a potential Swansea-Cardiff final. I'm just going to bring up Nigel Williams' comments here. How do you see it going then, Ryan?
Well, I'd start off by saying, I think this might be the tightest playoffs the Championship has seen in quite some time. Like last season, for example, I think pretty much everyone was expecting either Leeds or Villa to win it. But this one, you could make a decent shout for all 4 of them, really. I'll start off with the game tonight because each each leg has got a very interesting kind of tale behind it, in the way that the game tonight is between two sides who play very open attacking football. And in a way, that kind of benefits Brentford, because if there's one thing they've struggled against recently, it's sides who sit back and just let them have the ball, really, and just let them play around. And that's what they've struggled against. But Swansea don't let them do that. But Swansea are coming into the game on the crest of a wave. I know that's a cliche, but they are one of the form teams in the division and look very dangerous at the moment. And you wouldn't fancy playing them. The thing is with Brentford as well, if they are missing Janssen tonight, that's going to be a massive blow for them, because every time I've seen Brentford this season, they don't look half the sides defensively when they are missing Janssen, because what that usually means is they've got to play Janvier alongside Pinnock. And to say I've got a few question marks about Janvier is an understatement. So if that is the case, when they've got someone like Ryan Brewster in the Swansea side who is as on fire as he is, I'm not too sure Brentford will be able to pull through against this Swansea side. But as I say, the style of play that Swansea play does suit them. So it's very interesting. But the Fulham-Cardiff one is probably even more interesting, just because Cardiff are the form side, probably even more so than Swansea, heading into the playoffs. And Fulham struggle when they play against the side. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Fulham struggle when a side shithouses it. So, and Cardiff are not afraid to shithouse. So, when that game plays, it's Monday night, isn't it? That game. It'll be very interesting to see how Cardiff set up against Fulham, because if Cardiff sit back, let Fulham pass it around and just, have the ball, then I think Fulham are going to struggle, because Cardiff are a very hard side to break down at the moment. Sean Morrison and Curtis Nelson at the back for Cardiff have been superb since lockdown, and they've looked at very difficult sides to play against. And I've got a sneaky feeling Cardiff will go all the way, just because of how tactically organised they've been under Neil Harris, especially since lockdown. And I over the years, we've seen that the sides who are the most organised usually go on to win the whole thing. So it wouldn't surprise me if Cardiff went and did the business, really. I don't know about you guys. Who have you guys all backed?
Well, I went Swansea.
I went with Fulham.
Yeah, I went for Brentford.
I was like you, and to coin your phrase, I heard you say it on the pod the other day when I listened, and I said it on here yesterday. I fancy Cardiff to shithouse it. I do genuinely think that. Listen, I think Brentford probably get past Swansea, because much like Leeds, they're gonna come and have a go. I think and it's gonna be suited to Brentford. But I just think in the final, if Cardiff were to make it, whoever's going to go up against them, it's going to be so difficult. Even Leeds, we've seen this season what happened. If we were in the playoffs, I'd be looking at that Cardiff thinking, no, thank you. And we've seen that this season when they beat us after lockdown. Neil Harris knows what he's doing. Warnock 2.0. That's the name. But I just can't see past Cardiff, if I'm honest. But it'd be tasty, wouldn't it? An all Welsh final. I think that'd be something to look forward to. But I guess we'll wait and see. But we are doing a watch along tonight, aren't we, Oscar? So you'll be able to get it firsthand on All Leeds TV.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if it does come down to Brentford beating Swansea, then Cardiff will be looking to shithouse it basically in all three games in the playoffs. And those, if they do come up against Fulham and they do come up against Brentford, we've seen them both this season struggle against sides who are more than happy to just sit back and let them have the ball. So it's incredibly interesting, and it's so hard to call. We all know the playoffs is a lottery anyway, but this is even more of a lottery than it usually is.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a thought though, guys. What if it were a Cardiff-Swansea final? Would they move it to Millennium Stadium?
I did see them saying that, and it does make sense, really, doesn't it? Because over over the years we've seen, like when it was Derby Leeds in the final last year, both sides had to travel down south to go to London, so it didn't really make much sense. But I think it will be at Wembley, won't it? But I suppose Millennium Stadium does make a lot more sense. But at the same time, that is in Cardiff's backyard, so Swansea fans might not be too happy about that.
I mean, there's been a few comments about Brentford's inexperience compared to, say, for example, Cardiff having plenty of experience. How important do you think experience is in these kind of games, Ryan?
I think it is important, yeah, because Cardiff, they've had players who have got promoted in the past, and then off the top of my head, I don't think any Brentford player has been promoted. I might be wrong there, but I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who has actually got promotion there. And Janssen, over the years, as we've seen, has struggled to get promoted, even though he is someone who's quite experienced in promotion races. I think when it comes to organisation, again, I keep bringing that up, but I think keeping your nerve and being experienced when it comes to getting promotion is another thing that is so crucial in the playoff race. Over the course of the season, being the more talented player, I think, does pay off, but when it comes down to stuff like this, and as we saw with Brentford, I've said on the podcast recently that they have looked so nervous over the past couple of games. And when Barnsley and Stoke just sat back and let them have the ball, they were panicking. And you can't do that at this crucial part of the season, and that's ultimately cost them. So, yeah, I think experience and knowing how to get promoted is, of course, crucial when it comes to the playoffs.
We just wanted to say, guys, as well, for anyone watching the this live stream, make sure you get your questions in for Ryan as well. If you've got any questions you want Ryan to cover, or the whole team to cover, make sure you get them in, guys. But the next we wanted to move on to, Ryan, was obviously Leeds United's recruitment strategy. We've heard Angus Kinnear, Victor Orta be very emphatic in saying that they're targeting the cream of the Championship, was how they put it, presumably translating to the best players in the Championship. Who would you say myself, Joe and Jack discussed at length yesterday who we felt that was in terms of who the best players in the Championship are. Who would you say is the players we should be looking at in the Championship for the Premier League?
Well, I'll start off by saying Leeds, obviously, I don't know what their transfer budget is, but they've only got a pot to sign so many players, haven't they? And I think it's quite obvious that Leeds need to strengthen in 3 areas before they start looking in other areas. So that'll be left back, centre back, maybe even 2 centre backs, and then up front. Now, I listened to a bit of Benjamin Bloom yesterday, and he mentioned Mike van der Hoorn, which would instantly be a standout signing for me because he, as far as I'm aware, his contract situation at Swansea hasn't been dealt with. And the one thing he's looking for next season is Premier League football. Now, Swansea still have a chance of getting Premier League football, but if they don't go up, I imagine he'll leave. And he is one of the best centre-backs in the Championship. One reason he's not been spoken about much this season is because he's had his injury problems, which would be a concern if I was Leeds. But if he does manage to stay fit, you've got yourselves a Premier League defender on a free. So that goes without saying that he'd be a superb signing. Another centre-back would be Ethan Pinnock, who we've already mentioned. But the problem with Pinnock would be, I don't think you'd be signing him for at least 30 million. And then when you're getting into that kind of price range, you've got an argument to say, well, you may as well go for Ben White. And I know Brighton are playing hardball with Ben White, but if you start flashing 40 million quid in their faces, I think they might start changing their minds. But for someone like Pinnock, he'd be a quality signing as well. He's someone who looks like he's getting better and better, and I'm convinced he'll be in the Premier League at some point, maybe even playing for England at some point. Left back, as I say, there aren't too many standout left backs in the Championship this season. Rico Henry would be one at Brentford, but he's someone who you'd probably be asking 20 million quid for. But I completely forgot until I started having a good think about it yesterday. An obvious choice would be Anthony Robinson at Wigan, who, as we all know, was nearly signing for AC Milan last January. But I think his medical flashed up a heart problem, which I think has now been dealt with. But with Wigan in their current financial state, it looks like they're selling players on the cheap. So you could be getting someone like Anthony Robinson, he was linked with Everton actually earlier in the season. You could be getting a top quality left back for, if I had to take a guess, probably £5 million. So he'd be an obvious signing for me. And obviously, if he doesn't work out, then you've got the likes of Douglas, Dallas, Alioski, who can easily just slide back into left back. And then up front is the interesting one, isn't it? Because I know you can ask me about this later, but Leeds would have been one of the top championship sides ever if they had a striker who could put the ball in the back of the net consistently. The thing is, with the striker, you're looking for someone who suits Bielsa's style of play, and that's, linking up the play and working hard. So Ollie Watkins is the obvious shout there, but again, I think Brentford will easily be asking for 40 million for him. And when it gets into that ballpark, I know, is it Usman Adward at Celtic you were linked with?
Yeah.
They're talking 50 million for him. So whatever the case, if you want to sign a proven goal scorer who does, suit Bielsa's style of play, you're talking a ridiculous amount of money. And then when you really think about it, 40 million for Pinnock, 40 million for Watkins, the price starts adding up a bit, doesn't it? And that means you haven't got much money to spend elsewhere in other areas. If you're looking elsewhere on the pitch, then Easy at QPR is an obvious shout. He is going to be a top player someday, and I think QPR might very well sell him for 20 million or so, and that is a ridiculous price for the player that he could end up being. Apart from that, I think that's all Brentford really need to look for, really. Just players who are at a championship level, still fairly young, and could have a resale value. And they're the main players that I'll be looking at if I was Victor Orta at the moment.
What do you think to that then, guys? What I found interesting there was the mention of Anthony Robinson. The exact same thing Benjamin Bloom said. He's a player that's, again, another player that's kind of gone under the radar this season until Milan came into town. It's been interesting. But Jack, Joe, what do you think to that, guys? Of Ryan's suggestions there.
Well, the Anthony Robinson one thing, obviously, you're getting for peanuts, wouldn't you? No disrespect to Wigan, but obviously the financial difficulties that they're in, I think there'll be a lot of teams now sniffing around all their players, the half-decent players anyway. I'm sure that he's going to be on the radar of a lot of teams now. I know he is a good player. I don't know too much about him, to be fair, but I know he is a good player from what I've read and heard. But Eze, I think I've seen a question up there, just came up from someone. They asked which player would fit into that current Leeds team now, and he'd be the kid for me, Eze, straight away, without a doubt. He's centre midfield there. Him and Phillips would just complement each other so well. Yeah.
With me, just on Leeds business as a whole, I think, Ryan mentioned their resale value. I even think these figures that are getting banded about by Brighton for Ben White, I genuinely think he's that good that even if we were to pay 30 million for him, he would still get a resale value. I mean, we speak about all the time. Harry Maguire went for 80, and if he's going for 80 in a couple of seasons' time, Ben White's, I genuinely believe he could fit in alongside a Virgil van Dijk in a few seasons. I genuinely believe he's that good. And I know a lot of people might watch this and think you're talking shit, but listen, after seeing him for 46 games, he is literally that good. And even in the lockdown, he's been even better. I don't know if it's because the pressure's off and we've been seeing it more, but he just seems to be marauding into midfield more than he has done. He's doing Cruyffies and stuff to get round players. It's unreal to watch as a centre-back, especially when we've had the likes of Jason Pearce, Lee Peltier, Scott Wotton in the past.
Rocky Junior.
I still look at Lee Peltier and think, how did you play Premier League football? It's still beyond me. But yeah, Ben White's a massive one. And I don't know, I know it's come up by LUFC fan zone, and I think it's worth asking Ryan about the teams that possibly could come down. I think we probably going to sign Buendia at Norwich. Does that look after the Pablo Hernandez, the rotation between them two? Because I think we're gonna use Pablo a little bit sparingly, like we have done since lockdown. So But yeah, and Joe Gelhart's been mentioned as well from Wigan, and as Benjamin Bloom said yesterday, you know, they're in administration, and if money's put in front of them, they're going to accept. But again, like you guys said, because of Wigan's situation, there's going to be a lot of clubs going in for them, isn't there? But yeah, on the left back as well, I don't know, does Barry Douglas get... I mean, we haven't seen the best Barry Douglas. I don't know what goes on at left back. Does Bielsa keep faith with Stewie D? I just don't know if that's... I know from the outside looking in, I just don't know if inside the club they're looking at that position because of the numbers we have there and because of the versatility in the players that can play there, i.e. Alioski can play. Because ultimately, Bielsa likes players that can play a multitude of positions, doesn't he? Look at Pascal Strout coming in. He's already... And even when Shackleton play midfield, but he'll play him at right back, and it was the same with Robbie Gotts, right back, and then plays in midfield against Arsenal. He likes to be able to move these players around, so it's going to be interesting how the summer goes. But I'm really excited. I know a lot of people, but you know, there's the kid Jonathan David being mentioned today. There's been noise coming out about Adidas possibly helping us with a key marquee signing, a bit like the Rooney and the 32 Red deal. Maybe they look at Jonathan David, who's sponsored by Adidas, as that key man. I know a lot of people made the link with Cavani, but I keep saying it and I'll say it again. Cavani is not going to be playing at Ellen Road next season. It's just not happening. Like, it's genuinely not happening. People need to move on. If I'm wrong, then fair enough. There's no way Edison Cavani rocks up to sit on the bench to Paddy Bamford in the first game. not a chance. But I'll pass back to you, Oscar.
Well, I mean, yeah, Ryan. I mean, obviously the question on screen there, I think it's a cracking question that Joe spotted there. If Leeds were to coach one player from say if it is presumably going to be Norwich, Bournemouth and Watford later on today, who would you pick out of those three teams, one player?
Well, Brendy is the one who's been mentioned, hasn't he? But as mentioned, you've got three positions where I think Leeds do need to be focusing on first before they start looking elsewhere. Jamal Lewis, I've seen mentioned in the comments as well, is a good shout. He really impressed me when Norwich got promoted last season. And he looks to be someone who could be a very, very good player in a few years' time. But another one at Norwich is Ben Godfrey, who can play with the ball at his feet. He's the Bielsa kind of player, really. And he obviously has been a bit shaky at times this season because he is playing in a Norwich defence who have been quite hopeless defensively. But at the same time, if he has got an experienced man next to him like Liam Cooper, I think he could be a top Premier League player. As opposed to the other clubs, I'm struggling, to be honest, because I look at the likes of Bournemouth, Watford, Villa, and all those players at those clubs are getting paid massive wages. I don't think it's the same case as it is at Norwich, who seem to have more of a hold on things with the wage bill. But I just struggle to see much value in the players that are going to be at Bournemouth and Watford. But at Norwich, I think you have got a decent talent pool there of players that they could be poaching from. And Godfrey and Lewis would be the ones I'd be looking at, to be honest.
And Jack, was there anyone who's really stood out for you from the Premier League in terms of the struggling team?
Yesterday, obviously, remember Pookie in the Championship, and he just tore a new backside out of it, didn't he? But then he went. I mean, when they first got promoted, and I mean, he scored first few games, didn't he? But then he seemed to have gone off the boil, didn't he? And did he find it too hard? People speaking Pookie, go for him. Would he fit in the Leeds team? I mean, I don't think he would fit in the Leeds team, but he's had a year with Norwich. They've struggled all year. Would he fit in with Leeds and go again and have another year in Premier League? Would it play? I don't think so. I don't think Pookie would be the right one for us. I mean, there's talks there, obviously. One of our old boys, Lewis Cook. And I know there's a lot of romance in getting Lewis back to the club. But me personally, no. I wouldn't be too bothered about Lewis Cook coming back. Mr. Grealish, definite no. Oh, then again, they're going to stay up out of the Villa bit, looks of it. I were going to go down, and I wanted them down. But I don't know. Just Buendia. I think Buendia would be, like I say, the ideal person to take over Pablo, and we need to be looking for that sort of playmaker again. So we haven't got anyone other than Pablo, anyone like Pablo. So yeah, he'd be the man for me. I think Buendia.
I've always been a bit skeptical about Pookie, just because I know he got a ridiculous amount, like 29 goals in the Championship last season, but the underlying data didn't really reflect his goal scoring ability, really. And I was skeptical about whether we would be able to make the step up in the Premier League, and he hasn't at the end of the day, has he? Because he scored a few goals at the start of the season, and then must be about 2 in 30 games, which you can't be relying on that to stay up in the Championship, can you? But I think if Leeds do sign the right striker, you could be looking at top half next season, because you've got to remember the bottom half of the Premier League is very average, and with a decent side, you could easily be looking at top half. And we all know Leeds create a ridiculous amount of chances, so you need to sign someone who is a goal scorer, which I don't think has necessarily been the priority under Bielsa, because obviously they've relied on Patrick Bamford, who his record in the Premier League, that speaks for itself. I can't remember off the top of my head, is it like 1 goal at 4 different clubs? Leeds can't be relying on that next season, so a striker does need to be a priority. I've seen Callum Wilson mentioned in the comments as well, but he's someone who seems to have gone off the ball recently as well. And something just doesn't seem right with his career at the moment. And I wouldn't be willing to pay 40 million for him, or 34 to 40 million for him, when he has been so poor in the past 6 months. So maybe Leeds do have to look abroad, because you're talking 40 million or so for someone like Watkins, someone like Wilson. And then you've got Jonathan David being mentioned, for example. I don't know anything about him, I'll be honest. But he's being touted for 20 million, and he's still only 20. So maybe taking a punt on someone from abroad is the way it's got to be done, because signing someone who has managed to score a hatload of goals in England, it seems like you're going to have to get your checkbook out.
Yeah, I think just to come in on that, I think that one of these days, one of these punts are going to stick. And we tried with Nketiah, and no one can. This is the thing. I think a lot of people forget that Nketiah's got bags of potential. JKA had bags of potential, and the reason we've had to rely on Bamford as much is because the JKA didn't work. When that was done, that was a huge coup for Leeds United. And I do think we probably do have to go abroad for it, and because, like you say, the figures that they'll want in England's probably crazy. But one of these days, one of them will stick, and hopefully it might be a Jonathan David. And I do think, there is, yes, Bielsa will always play Bamford, etc. We get that, and I think it's because of this reliance on, you must have certain body fat, etc. And that's why JKA didn't work, because by all accounts, although he looked lean to us on social media when he was showing, he was still a little bit overweight and didn't quite come in at the right, specifications. And at that point, Leeds United are thinking, let's not play him, because we'll have to pay that money for him. And they're trying to get out of this deal. I said yesterday, apparently it's because the loan deal was ended before Premiership football was confirmed. We're going to say, well, theoretically, we haven't breached the contract. Whether or not that'll work, I mean, we'll wait and see. That'll probably rumble on. But I think for me, the team's coming down if we do get Buendia. But I'd like us to look at a Conor Gallagher and a Ryan Brewster, for example. Players that have been loaned, like Harry Wilson did at Derby last season. He did well, then was loaned to a lower league Premier League side. And I think that's what Leeds United is, maybe knock on Chelsea and Liverpool's door and say, look, do you want to test them at Premier League level? Let us take them, just because I was really, really impressed with Conor Gallagher at Charlton, and he was good when we played them, recently, Swansea. And he's someone who could fit in, switch with Pablo maybe if we don't go for Buendia. I'm not sure, but I'd like us to look at that type of player from the Premier League's top teams.
Yeah, the thing is with someone like Conor Gallagher, he would suit the Leeds style of play, definitely, because he is that kind of player. But as you mentioned with Harry Wilson, it's not really worked out for him at Bournemouth this season. I remember when Tammy Abraham, he had his loan spell at Bristol City, didn't he? And scored a hatload of goals, and then went to Swansea, and that didn't really work out too well either. So there is that risk factor there. But I think someone like Gallagher could definitely pay off, if not this season, then definitely in the future. Rhian Brewster is an interesting one for me because I'm not completely convinced he would suit the Leeds style of play. He's kind of an Nketiah kind of player, really, and that's the one thing that Bielsa held against him, wasn't it? That Nketiah wasn't willing to do the stuff that Bamford was willing to do, and I see a lot of that in Brewster. But he is a goal scorer, and I don't know. I'm not 100% convinced on Brewster. I think maybe he could just do with having another season at Championship level, because this is his first season back since he had a really bad injury as well, and he's only been in the Championship since January, and he has done superb. And I'm a big fan of Brewster. I've got to say, he is a Premier League striker in the making, but maybe just one more season at Championship level will do him a world of good.
I mean, we've spoken a lot about incomings, but I've seen a very interesting comment here from David Coleman. I'd be interested in what you guys think. It's not really something we've discussed so far. But do you think there's any players, not so much leave the club, who you don't see as being ready for the Premier League, who you don't think could make the step up from the current team? If we went to Jack first, is there anyone in our team who you don't think is capable of playing Premier League football?
Now, this might be a bit of a controversial one, but he is my player here, but I don't think Dallas will be ready to start.
That's hurt me there, that has, Jack.
I don't. Klitsch is another one. I just don't know if it's like you. I mean, maybe I'm looking at top end here and I'm thinking, right, these players against likes of De Bruyne, against Salah, against Sterling, and I'm thinking, how are they going to cope against them? Which we know with these kind of players are not going to be able to, just compete properly against them, but they'll do a job and they'll do their best. But then you've got obviously your lower end, your Burnley players, and yeah, they could probably do a job against them. And it's hard because I'm trying to be loyal here to players. It's like even I don't know, even Luke Ayling, I know. I'm like that. There's a few there. If I'm looking at it, the ones that I would definitely have there, I mean, I have Costa. I know a lot of people give Costa the championship, but I think in Premier League, I think he'll suit him more. The Premier League, I do. Just my opinion. Phillips, obviously, definite. Ben White, if we can get him. And it's an hard one for me. I haven't really thought about it too much, that I haven't. But yeah, Dallas would be the one I'd pick out. I wouldn't have thought he would cut it in the Premier League. I don't think so.
I can see Joe Wayman, just steam coming out of his ears. It's like me when people say Pablo isn't our best of the players. But go on then, Joe. I can see you're ready to go there. Go on then, Joe Wayman.
Do you know what it is? No, honestly, I maybe have to take sentiment out of it, because I do look at, I'm a massive fan of Liam Cooper. I was so happy to see him. I forgot
Cooper as well. Definitely Cooper.
Yeah, so happy to see him get to lift that trophy, being a Leeds fan, etc. Being there, him and Berardi, I believe, have been there the longest, and it was nice to see that. I don't know, like Cooper up against the likes of Aguero, Salah, Mane. Oh, it scares me. So it'd be interesting to see how that one pans out. Listen, I was talking to someone this morning. They messaged me, and we were talking about, the Messi saying he wants Bielsa at Barca, etc. And I mean this with the greatest respect to the players. Take Bielsa out of that squad, we're relegated, right? And that's how important he is. Like, the squad on paper, it's just not Premier League quality. But and I'm sorry to say that, it hurts, but ultimately Bielsa is the one that takes these forward. I'm quite surprised with the Click one. I know Benjamin Bloom mentioned it yesterday, and you've just mentioned it, Jack. I think Click will be fine in the Prem. I genuinely do. I'm looking forward to seeing Forshaw. Speaking to Borough fans, living in the North East, they said he had his best time with Borough in the Prem. I think he has a lot more time and can dictate it, so I like to see him in there. It's the likes of Alioski and that, for me, the substitutions then that come on, that are they going to really have an impact on a game in the Prem? I'm not sure. I wouldn't mess with the back four. It's been watertight. It's been one of the best back fours in Europe all season. So for me, I don't know. I need to take sentiment out of it, I guess, because you'd look at it and Cooper, Dallas. Ayling's fine. Ayling's fine for me. I really rate him. But then again, it's different when you're pushing forward, when you've got, you know, a Mane on your side or whatever. You know what I mean? It's totally different kettle of fish. And I've said it and I'll keep saying it. We have to be in the mindset that some games we're going to get a battered 3, 4, 5, genuinely against top teams. And we have to accept that fact, because we're going to go up and have a go. But I do think we'll shock more than we won't. And like Ryan said, I'll say it and I'll say it again. I think we could do a Sheffield United and be knocking on the door of Europe. And I don't know if any of you seen Victor Orta's speech at the Player Awards. He even makes that claim himself and says, you know, this group, this players, you know, stick with us. We're going to Europa League and we'll eventually take this club back to the Champions League where it belongs. So, and you know, when I hear them say that, I have faith. It's not like when David Hockaday sat in front saying Chelino's going to take us to the Champions League. At that point, you're thinking, get off, I'm done. But when Victor Orta and Bielsa and Radrazani are saying it, you think, do you know what? There is a real possibility. Adidas through the door, 5-year deal, things are on the up, improvements at the ground. It's just great to be a Leeds United fan right now. And I know I've gone off on a tangent, but I always do. But yeah, I'll go back to you, Os.
I mean, Ryan, is there anyone, you know, looking at it from because obviously there's a lot of sentiment, you know, from us to think every single player is loved in this squad, but from a neutral looking in, you know, is there anyone in that squad who've looked at this season and thought, against Mo Salah, against Kevin De Bruyne, against Virgil van Dijk, they're going to struggle next season? What would you say to that, Ryan? Is there anyone who stood out you don't think's ready for the step up?
Just on what Jack and Joe were saying, I think they're maybe being a bit harsh on some of the players, because I think if you took the lead side from this season, that's including Ben White as well, the only area that I think you could strengthen would be striker. And then apart from that, I think Leeds would probably stay up. I think if you had to single out players, Bamford's the obvious one because of his record at Premier League level, just isn't good enough, but he's a more than handy backup to whoever Leeds do sign. Cooper, I'm not convinced by. That's why I'd say Leeds would probably need a couple of centre-backs heading into next season. And then the rest of them are just fringe players, really, aren't they? The likes of Alioski, Dallas, Douglas. Those kind of players are the ones that I'd be looking at and saying, okay, you could maybe fill out the squad, but I wouldn't feel comfortable with you starting 40 games in the Premier League next season. The likes of Click, I think, would have to be moved on after a certain period for someone better. I think he is good enough for the Premier League, but not someone to take you to the next level. And I hate to say it, but Pablo is getting on a bit, isn't he? Those legs aren't going to last forever. He does age like a fine wine, but you know, he's not superhuman. So he will be someone who's got to be strengthened on as well. But I think Aylin will be able to do a job at Leeds in the Premier League for a good couple of seasons as well. So yeah, I think the main ones I'd say in the starting 11 would be Bamford, Cooper, and then your choice of 3 left backs. They're the areas, they're the players that I think maybe I'd be a bit concerned about in the Premier League.
I mean, I'd probably agree with what you guys are saying. I think the thing with what Joe said was the back four's been watertight. You know, let's go with it into the Premier League. I'd probably agree with that, to be fair. I think, but I would have people in reserve. You know, I would probably look at a left back and think, okay, if Shuey D has a really bad first few games, we can switch that up a little bit. You know, another centre half. If Coops, I would agree. I think Coops and Dallas are the two I look at and think in terms of technical quality against really technical, because obviously the Championship, I said yesterday, when you're up against Kiefer Moore, and Gary Medine, people like that who are just absolute target men and that. Like you can just, you know, you're going to look better than them, kind of thing. Yeah, most people will look better than them, but I think in terms of technical quality, particularly with attacking players, we've got to consider that. And I do look at Coops and Dallas and think, yeah, okay, it might be a struggle, but it might not. You know, we've seen how much Coops has improved season on season alongside quality centre backs. You know, I think in any team, when you've got someone like Ben White, Luke Ayling, they improve the players around them, and that's probably going to be a big thing as well. It's not necessarily because you look at Sheffield United. You know, I don't think there's a player genuinely in that Sheffield United squad individually, other than maybe John Egan, possibly Ollie Norwood, who I would take, to be honest. I just think as a collective, I think it just works so well. They complement each other so well. You know, you've got two fantastic wing backs who individually are not brilliant, but in the system, the way they play, it's so simple. Keep the width, put balls into the box for McGoldrick and McBurney to get their heads on. You know, Norwood, Fleck, keep it as simple as possible. Win your 50-50s, work hard. John Lundstrom as well, work hard. And sometimes it is that simple. You know, it's not a case of overcomplicating it. But I think obviously Ryan was saying about people like Click, Hernandez, as we progress, and we want to really progress, like, you know, Joe was saying, Victor Orta was talking about it, looking at the Wolves model. Wolves just kind of constantly added to things. They haven't completely torn apart the Championship team, but they just added to things just slowly. You know, I think when they went up, they took Ryan Bennett out of the team, replaced him. Obviously, they took Barry Douglas out, replaced him with Johnny Otto, and just gradually upgraded positions season by season, and they just slowly progressed. And now they're built to be a top 4 team. But I don't know what you guys think of that. I think I would agree. I pretty much agree with all what you're saying. You know, I think with Jack, you know, Coops and Dallas, Joe saying about keeping it together, and Ryan just saying about slowly building. I think that's pretty much what we'd need to do anyway, guys.
Yeah, you don't want to completely tear up the rule book, do you? You want to just slowly address the positions that need addressing, really. And I keep saying it, but those 3 positions, centre back, left back, striker, are the positions that need to be strengthened. And then if you can add, if there is any money left in the pot, you may as well go sign someone like Eberechi Eze, who is, I think, Premier League quality now and will only get better and better as time goes on. I've seen a few people mention Goalkeeper as well, which is one that I completely forgot about for some reason, but is an interesting point because Kiko, I've had plenty of question marks over the past couple of seasons now. And then Meslier, I haven't really seen enough of because he's only been playing in the past few games. And it's not until, you know, he makes a clanger or something like that, that you start really raising question marks about them. What do you guys think of Meslier? Is he good enough for the Premier League?
Well, he's grown on me, Meslier. I mean, obviously, you'll probably remember the Arsenal game. That's when he come into everyone's attention. His distribution that night was first class. How he played, he was fantastic. And I think the games since he's come in, since Kiko was banned, I don't think he's done a hell of a lot wrong. I don't think he's done a lot wrong. You watch him, he's commanding. I mean, 6'7", 6'8", but he actually commands his box as well. And for such a young keeper, you watch him, he's very confident. He screams at his defence. And that, I like to see that. I like to see a keeper absolutely tearing into the defence, you know, and keeping them on the toes, being at them. I think we do need an experienced keeper maybe to work with him, to be with him. But I'd give him a start. I do. I think he can only get better, that kid. I do.
Yeah, just to come in there, I agree. Listen, I remember doing the second tier where we did the second tier meets, and I was backing Kiko at that point. I think sometimes my Leeds United bias like shrouds my vision, but you know, it was quite interesting, you know, as the lockdown went on, and I don't know if it was PTSD of Kiko, but when we would get corners and stuff, I would initially be nervous. Towards the end of these 9 games, there were no nerves there because genuinely Meslier dealt with it all. And I'll let Oscar, you know, in a sec, because Oscar's a massive fan. We've got him for 5 million. I think it's a real coup. He's only going to get better. I've seen that Romero at Scum third choice there could possibly be coming in, and maybe that's the experienced head we look at to work alongside a Meslier. That's what I'd do, go after that experienced keeper. And Meslier, in the performances since we've returned, more than deserves a shot at Premier League football. And for 5 million, I genuinely think we've got a snip, haven't we, Oscar?
Yeah, I think so. I think with what Jack was saying, he's not done a lot wrong. And I think that's the greatest compliment you can pay to a goalkeeper, that he's played, and up until kind of like Swansea or Barnsley away, when we were under a bit of pressure in both games and closed them out 1-0, I wasn't really noticing Meslier that much. And that's probably the best thing you can say about it. He wasn't doing much wrong. He was nice and composed. Everything felt calm. And I think that's the greatest thing you can have as a goalkeeper. We talk about, the best goalkeepers in the world, Alisson, Edison. They don't make 5 or 6 world-class saves a game. They just keep it calm. And then when the one moment or 2 moments in the game when they need to step up, make a big save, come through a corner, deal with something, they do it. And just to add as well, I think his distribution is just absolutely outstanding for someone of his age. Left foot, right foot. He's got both feet, and he just seems so composed in those situations. But just going to Romero, I think for me, he's outstanding, to be honest. I think he's an outstanding goalkeeper. I think a lot of people say that he's probably the best second choice, third choice goalkeeper in the world in that kind of point of view. He was not playing games, if that makes sense. But I think that'd be an outstanding one if we're going down that route. But I think experience, if we are getting another goalkeeper in instead of Casilla, I think experience is important. It's no good getting someone who's 20, 21, as well as Meslier, because if Meslier has a bad game at Man City away and he's getting shot after shot after shot at him, he's making mistakes, we need someone with experience coming in instead of him, because we saw 2 years back when we had Bailey Peacock-Farrell and Jamal Blackman, if you remember him, right at the start, both inexperienced goalkeepers. And it didn't work, did it? It just didn't work. Whenever one came in, the other struggled. And I know Blackman played a couple of games in the Cups and he never looked convincing. It just felt like we lacked that leadership from the back at that time, and we conceded a lot of goals. And yeah, I'd probably go down that route if we need to bring him back up, which we probably do for Meslier, because Casilla is just nowhere near at it for me at Premier League level. Not even second choice for me. I'm not even sure I'd have him third choice. I just think he's nowhere. I think he's lost his head as a goalkeeper. The last couple of games he played for us before, obviously, his suspension, I felt he was just losing his head a little bit. All his confidence had gone, and it felt like a goalkeeper for me who clearly needs a move, probably back to Spain or elsewhere. I just don't think he particularly suited English football.
I think the telling thing as well, if you noticed at the celebrations the other night, there was no sign of Kiko. So maybe that's telling a story in itself. He wants out. I think he knows I don't think he could come back from the charge, even though it's retrospective charge, should we say, that he's been done for. I don't think he can come back from that now at Leeds United. I don't.
Yeah, it was quite. I mean, the decision. I mean, Bielsa's made some crazy ones. Let's be honest. I mean, when he played in Nketiah, even though he'd already agreed to go to Arsenal in that game against West Brom, and it just didn't work. And then Paddy came on and saved us in that game. And I genuinely was scratching my head when he played Kiko against Derby, and then was then not involved in the celebrations. It was a bit like, I don't understand that. And he almost made an error in that game. I think it was a miscommunication between Aylin and Kiko, and I was like, wow. Just shows how far we've come, because Meslier is assured. I just want to quickly jump in as well. It turns out now that Lille, who were interested and apparently had a bid rejected for Jonathan David, have now agreed personal terms with Morales at Rangers. So it looks that they've got their man. So that might open the door for Leeds United and Jonathan David. Just one to keep your eyes on, folks.
Well, they can have Moraes, because I've seen him mentioned before, Moraes, absolutely zero interest. Honestly, I could not think of, I don't know why any club would sign Moraes, to be honest. He's just, he's only going to play about 20. I'm happy they've done that, to be fair. Absolute madness, to be fair. That's good news, that, mate. We just talk a little bit more about the championship itself. Obviously, a big thing we spoke about yesterday between us and Benjamin Bloom was, where would you rank this Leeds team in terms of the all-time championship Leeds championship teams, Ryan, as such? Would you say it's up there with, say, your Wolves of 2 years ago, your Leicesters with Mahrez and Vardy, Newcastle's under Rafa Benitez? Would you rank it that high among the best, if not the best?
I'd say it's in a similar ballpark. I wouldn't say it's the best. I think the one thing that's been holding it back is a goal scorer, someone who would play instead of Bamford and, score 20, 25 goals a season is the one thing that's really holding it back. Because apart from that, when it comes to creating chances, being defensively solid, you're pretty much in the same kind of breath as, your Newcastles, your Wolves, your Reading side from 2005-06. It's an interesting question because this Leeds side is very good. And when you actually really have a retrospective look at this season, they have dominated the league, haven't they? And I have said on the podcast that I think the Brentford squad is the best in the division, but they are lacking a Marcelo Bielsa, which has ultimately been the difference this season and made this side what it is. So I'd say, in summary, they're probably about 7th, 8th best sides in Championship ever. If you had a consistent striker like someone like Ollie Watkins, for example, then you'd probably be talking for 2nd, 3rd.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's I think that was pretty much the same kind of angle Benjamin went on as well. But just to talk about, obviously, we know not to brag. Leeds are going out of the Championship. Is there anything you feel the second tier podcast yourself will miss about Leeds going out of the Championship, or is it good riddance? Get rid of them Leeds scum and that? Like, what's the feeling then, Ryan?
I mean, from a social media point of view, it's a bit annoying because every time we did a Leeds post, we could rely on that getting loads of likes and interactions. So that's gone out the window now. Cheers, lads. But in terms of what the Championship's going to be like without Leeds, it's going to be a bit weird because we've got quite used to having Leeds in the Championship, haven't we? And I think even though they get plenty of stick from other Championship fans, I think other Championship clubs do, when the fixtures come out at the start of the season, they'll look and try and find when Leeds are coming, because every time Leeds come to their grounds, it's a party, isn't it? And Leeds fans are belting out, marching on together constantly throughout the game and just creating a great atmosphere. And there's something Championship's going to miss because we've got quite used to it, really. So from that perspective, it's a massive loss. And it's one big club that the Championship is going to be lacking, because at one point it looked like the Championship was going to lose Leeds, but get Villa and West Ham. And now that doesn't look like it's happening. So instead of Leeds, West Brom, 2 massive clubs, we're being left with Bournemouth. So, it's disappointing that we are losing Leeds, but in a way, it was kind of inevitable that Leeds will be back in the Premier League at some point. Bit annoying that it's happened 1 year into the second tier podcast starting, but there you go. These things happen, and I'm delighted Leeds have got promoted, because the scenes when it eventually happened were brilliant to see. And Leeds, like quite a few Championship clubs, have been through the ringer over the years, haven't they? With the likes of Cellino, Hockaday, Heckingbottom, those kind of people. And to see where Leeds are now compared to those days, you've got to enjoy it, even though it is dirty Leeds.
Do you know on that as well? Like another team that I hold in that bracket is Nottingham Forest, and I just wanted to get your thoughts, Ryan, on that final day. We did a live watch along, and we were more concentrated on the live league table. I've got my laptop here. We were watching the Leeds game, and then I had the live league table here, and the amount of times it changed. I mean, how mad was that final day, mate?
It was insane. My job at the moment involves me getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So I tried to get to sleep quite early on, but I couldn't sleep because my heart was still racing from everything that was going on, because it was the maddest final day I think the Championship's ever seen by miles, because the playoff race pretty much seemed all but said and done, didn't it? We all just assumed that was it. Cardiff and Forest were going to get in the playoffs, and it was more a case of figuring out who's going to play who. I never expected Swansea to be in the playoffs in the end, especially because Forest have been in the playoffs now. I think they've been in the top 6 since November. And on the podcast, we were speaking like Forest were set in stone to be in the playoffs come July. So yeah, it was crazy from that point of view. And then the relegation battle as well. I never expected Barnsley to stay up either, because I thought Brentford would, walk past them at the end of the day. And even when it was 1-1, I never expected Barnsley to sneak a goal at the end and stay up. It was the maddest final day the Championship's ever seen. And in the end, to pretty much sum up how mental the Championship is, the three sides that were going for automatic promotion, none of them won. So that just pretty much sums it up. And be honest, from your perspective, I know you guys obviously want to get in the Premier League, but are you going to miss the madness of the Championship?
Yes and no.
Yeah. I am a bit.
I think yes, because we obviously in the Premier League, realistically, we're not going to win as many games. I said this yesterday. We're going to have to accept we're going to lose some games, 5 or 6-0 at City and Liverpool, etc., etc. But yeah, I think the Championship you're going to miss having games on a Tuesday night. You lose the game, you can play again in 3 or 4 days' time. You can bounce back straight away. And I think the thing with the Championship is what I really liked about the Championship is that you're only ever 1 or 2 results away from either a crisis or a complete momentum shift. It's the thing. Yeah, we saw it at Forest. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we were all saying about Forest, or if they get in the playoffs, they are the team to watch. And then they have one bad result at Derby, 90 plus 6-minute equaliser at Chris Martin, and it just spirals out of control from there. A game they were completely in control of. They can see the stupid goal. You think, they should just bounce back from that. Absolutely no problem. And just spirals out of control. And that's the thing of the Championship. I think it's all momentum. And, you're only ever 1 or 2 results away from a crisis. I mean, even Leeds, as good as we've been this season, guys, Jack and Joe, February time, we lost to Wigan, we lost to Forest. It felt like we were going into crisis mode and we were still in the top 2. But that's the thing I probably miss about it, how quickly things can change in this league.
Yeah, I think what it used to be, always at the start of season, every year would be you're thinking, this is it, this is our year. And now we've finally done it. I'm going to miss that now next year. I think this is it, we're going to do it this year. But no, of course, it's what we've all wanted, isn't it? The one thing I will say about Leeds, I don't think we'll ever turn to one of them plastic clubs that your Man City, your Chelsea's, your Arsenal's, with all these fake fans who all they're interested in doing is taking photos of being at the ground, taking photos of wearing half and half scarves and all that shit. I don't think the Premier League is actually prepared for what Leeds is going to bring to it. That's going to be the big thing. Yeah, that's going to be my thing I'm looking forward to next year, seeing the faces at fans when they've got, we only get 3,000 lunatics bouncing over each other like, what is going on here? It's a zoo. It's not a zoo. It's a football stadium.
Yeah, you're right. Do you know, just on that though as well, I think it was Digital Wilson who runs Leeds social media. Apparently when Premier League was confirmed, we gained 30,000 followers, and it's like, where were them 30,000 before? Like, what the But I mean, there you go. It's almost it's a football stadium's worth of followers in the space of a sec. So there are going to be times when I guess we're going to have to get used to that. But you are right. The heart of the club's never going to be ripped out, and it will be quite a shock. But like the Villas, etc., and that's why I wanted Forest. I genuinely felt they'd get in the playoffs, and I wanted them to come up with this, because I do look at them big clubs, and I'm happy to see Sheffield United up there, and I'm not saying they're on that level, but I just look at it's harping back to the 90s era a little bit. You know what I mean? Let's get some more of them big teams back up there. I'd love that. But one thing I won't miss from the EFL is, I mean, I don't think it'll be used in the Prem as much because we're not expected to do well, but that horrible chant of Leeds are falling apart. that chant honestly, I remember Chef Wednesday when they came this season, and knew who scored that goal. I think they won 2-0. And going back to the car, and Will Matt, and all I could hear was Leeds. It was like, please,
No.
Leeds, it, man.
You know, I sit right beside the away fans. How do you think?
I know you do. It's horrible. And at least in the Prem, you know, we're expected to lose, and it's fine. And we can say, well, we're expected to lose. We're not falling apart again. We're not going to win the league in August, as people like to tell us. You know what I mean? It's fine. So that's what I won't miss. Yeah, loads of tin pot teams giving us stick. Yeah.
And I think the other thing to mention is the EFL treatment of us. You know, I think it's just good to almost just stick two fingers up at them and say you've tried to just do everything against us. You know, the Spygate stuff, all that. I just feel in the Premier League, we're not necessarily going to be the most hated team. You know, there's loads of teams everyone hates in the Premier League and that lot. You know, from the Championship, we were that team that everyone wanted to put one over on us. You know, sing the Leeds are falling apart. It's kind of going from. Yeah, we're almost the hunters now, kind of thing. You know, it's just a strange kind of feeling. But, well, I mean, just to go on to it, Ryan, obviously we've seen Huddersfield made a very interesting appointment from in Carlos Corberán. Obviously, we know all about. I've speaking to the Huddersfield podcast with Brady Frost, and he was saying a lot about trying to build a relationship between Corberán and Bielsa, potentially us effectively becoming Huddersfield's feeder club. You know, people like Leif Davis, I'm sure you're aware of, Ian Paveda, Jamie Shackleton, you know, are exciting youngsters going into that Huddersfield team. Do you then suddenly think that's going to become quite a common thing in the Championship, you know, in the future? And is it for the better of the Championship if that kind of thing happens? You know, we've seen it with Huddersfield and Dortmund, you know, from many years ago. They had a really good working relationship together with David Wagner, even Norwich, and to an extent with the Bundesliga. Do you think that's for the better of the Championship? There's a lot of different potential recruitment systems going into place for next season.
Well, the interesting thing in the Championship is the salary cap that's being introduced. And from the sounds of it, it's going to completely change wage bills in the Championship forever. Because I think, I don't know the ins and outs of it. There's been loads of different reports about how it's all going to work, but they're on about the average wage in the Championship being £6,000 a week, which when you compare it now is not much for your average Championship player. So maybe in the future, we will get to a stage where clubs are relying on loan players from Premier League clubs for a bit of quality, because if the wage bill is £6,000 a week, then players are just going to get sniffed up by Premier League clubs, aren't they? Or leagues abroad. So maybe it is a step towards the future. And we all know how financially unstable plenty of clubs are in the Championship, and dipping into the loan market might be the way forward. So maybe Huddersfield are kind of, you know, a step ahead of everyone else. But I think heading into next season, if you don't mind me just talking about Huddersfield for a sec, because I'm very interested in how the Corberán thing is going to work out, because we've seen over the years plenty of assistant managers or coaches, you know, taking charge of a first team squad and they're not working out. Off the top of my head, Steve McLaren, Aitor Karanka worked for a bit, then kind of went all a bit tits up, didn't it? I'm trying to think of someone else. Jan Sievert, who was at Huddersfield before, that didn't work out. There's plenty of cases where these things haven't worked out, and there aren't really too many glittering stories of assistant managers or coaches taking charge of a first team side and it really working. So the thing is as well, Huddersfield are a club who seem to be on the decline at the moment. So that's one of the reasons why I'm surprised Corberán's took this job when he could have, you know, had a year in the Premier League with Bielsa and gain a bit more experience of what the top level's like. So I'm very surprised that he has taken on this job. I can only imagine Huddersfield are paying him a ridiculous amount of money because otherwise I can't really see why he would take on this job. But it wouldn't surprise me if he's maybe out of the job in a year's time.
Yeah, do you know, on that as well, I think the Cowleys were hard done by. You know,
very hard done by.
They secured basically league status, and then were sacked almost instantly. And maybe there is something in that Corberan as well. Going when he did, there was noise that he might go to. When was it in the summer? Forget the name. Our sister club in Spain, or what's the the team where Buendia was at? What's it called?
Cultural Leonese.
Yeah. There was that's it. Hi. There was noise.
That's been a fantastic working relationship, that, hasn't it?
I know.
I can't even remember the names now.
Yeah, well, it was over the Aspire Academy, wasn't it? And the only player that we didn't sign was Buendia, right? And he was the only one who was of any note, really. No, but there was noise that he might do that last summer, I think, and then obviously it didn't happen. And it is a bit strange because we've just been given Premier League status as a training ground, as a youth setup, which means we're going to play. We can play in the what's the trophy called where the Premier League? It used to be the LDV Vans. That trophy, right?
Yeah, Johnson's Pate. What is it? Johnson's Pate nowadays.
It was JPT. Now it's something else. Ryan might be able to tell us, but
nope.
Do you know what I mean? Though, when the Premier League teams go to play in League One, League Two,
23s down, don't you?
Yeah, basically.
Play against first teams, don't you? That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and us having now that Premier League status enables us to do that. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't know. It is a bit of a strange move, but if it goes well, because I think a lot of Leeds fans seen Corberan as Bielsa's super. You know, when, like people have said, training him up and then them getting the job like we've seen at other, clubs. But, yeah, it's an interesting one. But I'd have liked him to stay. And it's the Checker Trade Trophy.
There you go.
There you go. That big trophy.
Well, an interesting one coming in here, Sean Mooney, just saying Corberan, maybe he's looking to get this experience first and possibly come back one day if Bielsa leaves. I mean, see that as a possibility at all?
I'd say it's more likely if he stayed at Leeds, to be honest, because we never know what Bielsa's thinking, do we? Because, I mean, we still don't. He's not 100% secure for next season. No. Sorry, Leeds fans. But if Bielsa were to, step aside, then surely you'd be looking at someone like Corberan to just continue the progress that he's made. So it's a weird move. It doesn't make much sense to me at all, to be honest.
No.
I think we all want Poch, don't we, when Bielsa goes? As long as Poch stays out of a job, and then we'll take him.
I want Poch as his assistant.
Big.
Well, I guess, guys, I mean, if there's anything else you want to cover, guys, at all, that we've not covered at all. I mean, we're getting a lot of requests to talk about this bizarre story coming out of Barcelona. I think we've slightly touched on it, about supposedly Lionel Messi's holding the club to ransom and threatening to shoot unless they bring in Bielsa. I mean, I don't know about you guys. This has been a thing about Messi for years running Barcelona, but I just see this as a ludicrous story purely based on Lionel Messi once saying the words, "I'd love to be managed by Bielsa." What do you guys, just to finish off with, do you think this is a completely ludicrous story?
I said on Twitter earlier, give me a flat above a sweet shop in Wetherby over, Catalonia any day of the week.
Barcelona's a car crash in a minute, isn't it? Why would he want to go there?
I mean, I've got nothing to add on that.
It's a nothing story, isn't it?
Why would Marcelo go to a smaller club?
With lesser players.
Yeah. If anything, Messi should join him over here, right?
Never mind.
Adidas.
Yeah, he's their main man.
Exactly, maybe.
That's the marking finding that we're getting Messi.
Yeah. He still doesn't start over Pat, though.
No.
Hey. Yeah. Cool.
So, guys, I guess we'll leave it there, guys. Anyway, but a massive thanks to Ryan Dilks, from the Second Tier Podcast, joining us today. Guys, make sure you check out the Second Tier Podcast. The link will be in the description. Make sure you check it out. I know we're in the Premier League now, but we all want Carlos to do well at Huddersfield. Make sure you check out the Second Tier Podcast, and of course, Jack and Joe, the whole team, for joining us today. We're gonna leave it there anyway, guys. So, see you later, guys.
Ryan. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.